introduce Mr. Sergio Pimenta. He is our Director of Mass at IFC.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us for this parallel panel in the just before lunch. So I hope that we'll keep the energy level and the appetite so that we can then have a fruitful lunch. I'm very honored to be sitting at the panel with 4 distinguished panelists. I will make a comment before someone in the audience makes that. Unfortunately, we have an all-male panel. We were supposed to have a woman with us, a colleague, a client of ours, but unfortunately we had a last-minute change. IFC promotes diversity very strongly, and so we would like to have a more diverse panel next time. But I'm sure the panel members will agree with me on this point. So to my left, we have Anil Jain, the CEO from Jain Irrigation. Next to him, I'm sorry, no, the order has changed. Next to him, we have Pankaj Mehta from Carrier Transit Gold, followed by Sunil Nair from Snowman Logistics, and at the very end, we have Jaideep Singh from Rabobank, the Managing Director and Chief Operating Officer for India. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me, and we'll have a session where I will ask you to maybe start by giving 5-minute remarks on both the organization you represent and your views on the topic of this panel. But before we go there, I just wanted to make a couple of comments and to start to highlight the importance of the agriculture and food issues when we talk about climate. And you had the choice of different panels, and you chose the right one, since this one, for me, is I think, a most important topic when we talk about climate. A lot of people focus on, when we talk about climate, focus about energy and issues like this one, but they forget that agri has a very, very strong impact on climate. I mean, the global population, as we all know, is expected to reach 9 billion by 2050, and that will increase the food demand by over 50%. So it's a huge increase. And in agriculture, including the deforestation, which is related, account for about 25% of global GHG emissions, so just second after energy when it comes to the climate change agenda. Beyond just the GHG emissions, water impact is very significant. 70 or 80% of the world's available water is used in the agricultural supply chain today, so that's a very important number. You have to remember that on average we need 1 liter of water to produce 1 calorie of food, so it's a very big impact. So when we look at this increased demand for food and for feed in general, and we have constraints in terms of land and water and available sources for food, we really need to do more with less. And this is why we have the notion of climate smart agri, which is an important concept, and it's one of the key pillars in IFC's and the World Bank Group's agenda. When we talk about climate smart agri, it's a relatively new term. When we talk about the climate smart agri, people tend to focus about improving productivity or look at enhancing resilience, the adaptation issue, and also reducing GHGs. IFC is the first financial institution, multilateral institution, that came up with a core definition and also a very pragmatic approach on how to apply, how to measure and apply climate smart agri. And we believe that with this definition, we will be able to convince other financial partners to follow similar ones, so that the financial institutions in general can have a more consistent vision of what constitute climate smart agri. It's not always easy to measure, and I would give an example that my colleagues mentioned to me, which I find is very interesting. When we talk about GHG emissions and the contribution, we all know that when it comes to animal protein, that cows produce a lot of GHG, and so farmers don't measure it. It's very difficult for a farmer to go and measure a GHG emission of a cow that he or she is raising in his backyard. But what farmers do measure is the productivity of their milk. So they know how much a cow will produce. And there is a reverse correlation between productivity and GHG emissions. The more a cow produces milk, actually the less GHG emissions there is. So if we measure productivity, we can extrapolate and we can come up with the number of GHG emissions for the cow. So this is the type of pragmatic solutions that we're trying to implement and to push at the IFC. We've decided on the IFC side to focus mostly on three key themes around animal protein, about land and crops, and about waste, because a lot of food is wasted, and this is a major contribution to the major negative contribution to the climate agenda. So today, I think we will try to focus on two of these key topics around climate smart agri. One around waste. And I was reminded that in India, I mean, unfortunately it's not an exception, but in India, wastage of food is probably around 30 to 40% in the value chain. And the particularity in India is that it seems to be more between the farm and the retailer, so at the upper part of the chain, rather than in more developed countries where it tends to be after it reaches the supermarkets and the retailers where a lot of food is wasted. The food wasted in India could feed Brazil and Vietnam combined. So it's not a small amount. It's a very large number. So I'm very glad that some of the panelists here are very involved in the supply chain and in improving the quality of supply chain, so they will be able to talk about this topic. The second topic that I would like to discuss at this panel today is around productivity and how we improve yields in food. And we're very lucky to have Anil with us, who will be able to give us also some of the ideas on how this topic can be pragmatically implemented in India and in other countries. So with this, let me open up for the panel and maybe ask each of you to introduce yourself and give an overview of this topic for you. Anil?
Thank you, Sergio. Good afternoon to all of you. Our company, Jain Irrigation, is involved in the entire agri value chain. Just to get everybody up to start, if you think about India and Indian agriculture, we have all 140 million hectares of area under cultivation, one of the largest country in the world. We have 120 million farmers. So per farmer, the area is only 1.38 hectares. As a country, we have 17% of world's population and only 4% of world's freshwater resources. And part of those freshwater resources are in Himalayas. So real utilizable water resources available are hardly 2 to 3%. Out of the water being used in India, 83% gets used in agriculture. So if we can save in agriculture, we can have water for industry, housing, and all of the purposes. Because farm sizes are small and farmers have weak balance sheet, mechanization has not happened. So productivity is also quite low. Despite these issues, the recent numbers show in India there are two types of agriculture. One agriculture where farmers are growing based on monsoon rains, field crops like wheat, rice, etc. One crop or maybe two max. And these about 260 million tons. But Indian farmers are also now producing more than almost 250 million tons of fruits and vegetables, which is more value-added agriculture type. So there are two types of agriculture which exist. Now, when I talk about our company, over last couple of decades, we have reached out to more than about 6 to 7 million farmers. And what we are doing with these farmers is that we are trying to see that how even a 2 or a 3 acre farmer can create a level of productivity which would ensure on one hand, natural balance of resources in terms of climate change and sustainability, but also on the other hand, his income must go up. And because I think that's very important in this whole debate, then we talk about saving the earth from the environment and development and whatnot, but then what happens to the people who are involved? And India, we have received food security, but a lot of farmers still remain poor, and suicides of farmers is a current issue in our country. So our focus always has been that from the same piece of land, but by using less water, less energy, less fertilizer, less labor, how a farmer can more than double his output first. And once he produces the larger quantity, then can he produce more quality, which would result into a higher level of value for him. And we are doing that through drip irrigation or micro irrigation. But it is not just about micro irrigation where you provide water to the root zone of the crop, but it also about what I call now a concept of precision agriculture. You provide to plants exactly what they need, when they need, where they need, how much they need. If you do it, plants respond very well, and productivity goes up quite a lot. And we have seen this, but this is technology, right? It requires some level of investment. We have seen the farmers can recoup that investment in about 2 to 3 years. So ROI can be very good for them. Now, these solutions which we applied to farmers, while we started with fruits, vegetables, and so on, but now we are able to do it with rice also. I mean, we are now able to grow rice where micro irrigation is provided below the surface, below the soil. So you do not see any water in the field. Normally rice means knee deep water, and rice does generate large amount of GHG gases as well. But if you do it rice with drip, you don't have zero GHG emission in that context. So the technology we are applying to even crops like rice, which has never been done before. As a company, and I'm trying to cover up within 5 minutes, but as a company, we also buy from farmers what they grow. We buy fruits, vegetables, and so on, so that there is no waste. From their farm produce, they can bring to our plant, and we have regional plants in India, and we can consume all the quantity they grow, so they have zero waste, and we help them improve productivity by giving them good planting material as well. The third part which we also do is that for the energy solution, we have been providing farmer solar water pumps, because a lot of farmers in India do not have access to electricity. They use diesel pump, which again causes the environmental and climate issues. And these solar water pumps also helps farmer improve productivity and yield. As a company, while we operate mostly out of India, we have business outside India as well. We are operating across the world in about 100 different countries. And in places like in US, Australia, Brazil, we have now invested into latest agriculture technology using wireless sensors, where we can sense under the soil what is the level of nitrogen, what is the level of moisture, and then accordingly help the farmer to decide how much and when he should irrigate. So it's a lot more automated in that sense, using algorithms and predictive analysis and big data. So I believe the way Indian farmers are today, with this reduced amount of land, because some of the land is going into urbanization, we can continue to improve productivity significantly. And India, as we talk about over next 2 decades, needs to produce about close to 500 million tons of grains to feed growing population and population which wants more protein or more nutrition. That can be done with actually less land than what we have. It can be done with existing water resources, as long as the precision agriculture is provided to the farmer. Now, because Indian farmers are very small, and the current generation is not been exposed to formal knowledge, we need to do a lot of handholding. So our entire model is based upon transferring knowledge to the farmer about the best agriculture practices. And in fact, with IFC, we are the first company possibly in the world to create a good agriculture practice package, which is officially endorsed by the Global Gap organization, which farmers can sign up for. We provide all that knowledge free to them, and once they have it, then I think that results into high level of productivity. So it's a combination of hardware, it's a combination of software, it's about knowledge transfer, it's about balancing the natural resources with the development, but ensuring that a small farmer and a smallholder can be very viable while protecting the nature, so that it's there 30 or 50 years down the line.
Thank you very much, Anil. Maybe next, Pankaj, Meta.
Sure. Thank you, Sanjay. I represent Carrier Transicold, which is part of United Technologies, and we've been in India for more than 20 years. We operate in the cold chain space. We provide equipment for refrigerated transportation. One of the issues which all of us are aware is high wastage of food in India, and one of the most likely causes also the lack of cold chain infrastructure in the country. So we as a company have been working, trying to create awareness about cold chain, working with the government, various ministries. There's a lot of focus and a lot of good work being done by the government in trying to promote cold chain infrastructure in the country. There are subsidies, there are schemes available for people to invest in it. But I think one of the areas is also education. Education about the benefits of cold chain, to simplify it, especially for the farmer, because the perception is also that cold chain today is complicated, it's expensive, and not something that a farmer can get into. I mean, they consider it as very high tech, and it's something beyond their reach. So while we do work on trainings and training customers, training operators on cold chain, we also decided to take one step and go to the grassroots, try and see if we can work with a farmer and demonstrate a workable cold chain, show the business benefit, show that while the cost does go up, it leads to better profitability. And I think one of the reasons of this high wastage is the sword of perishability on fruits and vegetables or horticulture produce. I mean, the farmer is always under pressure to sell because his product is perishing very quickly. And if we were to find a solution out of this, I think one of them is extending the market space. I mean, the time he has to go to market by providing him storage facility, and also by allowing him access to markets which are further away from his typical zone of selling. So again, with cold chain, with the refrigerated transportation, that is possible. So with that aim in mind, we decided we were looking at several options, and we decided to look at one fruit called the quinoa. I mean, people from Delhi may be aware of it, but believe me, I stay in Mumbai, and my kids had never even heard of the name, what a quinoa is. Whereas in Delhi, if you're traveling during winters from Delhi to Chandigarh, you see it all across the highway. So it is a beautiful fruit. It's bright orange, very nutritious. And Punjab, the state of Abhor, the place of Abhor in close to Bathinda in Punjab, is probably one of the few areas in the world which grows this excellent fruit. But the irony is that even people in India don't know about it. While we get all the exotic fruits from abroad, we don't get the fruits that are grown in our own country. So with that intention, we decided to work with the National Center of Cold Chain Development. We decided to take up a pilot and see if we can address, at least for that one crop, if we can demonstrate a workable cold chain. That would be a show and tell, which would be a case example to the other states, to the other crops in the similar space. And believe me, it was such an eye-opener. We were able to reduce wastage by almost 30%. The productivity, the price that the farmer, in Punjab, he was getting like about 20 rupees a kg, which is what you get quinoa in the season. In South India, he got an average of 60 rupees a kg. So his profits went up tremendously. His incremental cost for implementing the cold chain was hardly 10 rupees per kg. So he made a huge profit. In the first season, as part of the pilot, we had to establish a pre-cooler because the crop obviously can't go straight from the farm to a reefer truck. So we established a pre-cooler. We use reefer trucks. Initially, we had 37 reefer truck loads of fruit going from Punjab to Bangalore, all the way down south. It went to Chennai. And the results were so encouraging that next year when we checked, this one pre-cooler had grown to 9. That means the other farmers had started taking it up. And that 37 reefer trucks had gone to 350 reefer trucks in the season 2. And believe me, it's become like such a flourishing, business. People have started adopting to cold chain like crazy in that area. So I would like to show a brief video on this. It's really an eye-opener, and it's something that if we can show people, just go there. It's not easy, believe me. Traveling to that place is a task by itself. It's 10 hours drive from Delhi. But it's very satisfying once you see the results. So if we can just see the video.
Quinoa is a relatively new member of the citrus family. This fruit is rich in mineral and vitamins and is gaining popularity. Abohar is a small town in the state of Punjab in North India.
You're okay.
It is one of the few places in the world suited to grow quinoas. In the current process, after harvesting during winter season, the fruit is
You can see it there.
waxed, sorted, and packed. The quinoas are then sent to the markets, usually by open trucks. a consequence, a high share of the quinoa is wasted during the hot season. It does not reach all the potential markets in India and abroad. Carrier decided to work with the National Center for Cold Chain Development India to conduct a pilot project to extend the holding life of the fruit so that it can reach Bangalore in South India during the hot season. With this purpose, Carrier identified Balaji Quinoas, one of the largest aggregator in the region, to set up a cold chain.
India, that is briefly, having English in math, French certificate, we are carriers briefly via. तो कैरियर के लिए काटू है बंगलोर भी गया, केरला मंडी में कुछ गया, चेन्नई भी गया, उसके अलावा रशिया भी गया, दुबई भी गया और बांग्लादेश में भी भेजा.
Balaji added Carrier cold chain solutions at the two key steps of the cold chain, preconditioning and connecting. The cold chain not only enables the consumers in the south of India to enjoy freshly squeezed quinoa juice, but it also helps in reducing wastage together with the associated carbon emissions while enhancing the farmer's income. This project eventually reinforces the government commitment to set up cold chain infrastructure for the local farmers.
कोल्ड चेन जो है वो हमारे फार्मर्स के लिए एक नई चीज है, नया प्रोजेक्ट है. इसके ਵਿੱਚ सरकार ਵੱਲੋਂ बड़ा उद्यम किया जा रहा है. टेक्नोलॉजी दे के कोल्ड चेन के प्रति सब्सिडाइज करके चीज़ां ਨੂੰ.
The positive outcome of the field study has sparked interest in the region, with several farmers interested in implementing the Carrier cold chain solutions. Quinoa is a relatively new
Thank you very much. I think very illustrative
Yeah.
video. So
Thank you. So you saw for yourself, it's not only within India, they had 80 containers of quinoa going to say Middle East and to Bangladesh and other parts of the world. So I mean the other aspect related to this session is also the carbon emission. We as part of the pilot, it was not only the farmers' productivity, we also were keen to see that the technology that is implemented, is it adding or is it, is it beneficial for the carbon emission? And we actually proved that it was lowering the carbon emission compared to the wastage that was created. So.
excellent. So thank you very much, Pankaj. Let me maybe pass on now to Sunil Nair from Snowman Logistics. If you can also introduce yourself and give a bit of an overview of the agenda.
Thank you, Sergio. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sunil. I represent a company called Snowman Logistics. Snowman Logistics is a cold chain solution provider. We basically take forward the processed food. So where the Pankaj and Anil leaves their stocks, and we take care of the responsibility of reaching it to the consumers. So we call it an end-to-end solution from farm to fork. We don't go up to the fork, we stop ourselves at the retail stores. So that B2B logistics business is what we do. We are 100,000 ton capacity company present in 14 cities in the country, which is good enough to reach out to any nook and corner of the country. And in last year, we have handled a volume of 100,000 tons of the stocks. 1,000 tons of 1,100 tons of the stocks, 1 million tons, sorry. When we see the agri produce, we have handled a volume of 700,000 tons of agri produce in last 12 months, which includes fresh fruits and vegetables, processed fruits and vegetables, seafood, dairy and meat produce. When it comes to agri produce, everyone talks about agri produce and the wastage that we find in this sector. The best way to reduce wastage is to process it right at the source, and that's where we come in picture. Once it is processed, then having it moved and stored in right climatic conditions so that the shelf life that is extended by processing it is assured, and then reach it to the markets which are farther places or to the consumption centers is the value add that we do in this sector. The seafood in this country is one of the most emerging agri-produce, where 1 million tons of seafood were exported from India to most of the developed countries in last 12 months. And Snowman facilitated 25% of that volume by providing storage and logistics solutions to the small exporters in the coastal areas of the Indian borders. While we work with a lot of multinational brands in terms of QSR and retail brands, we are most often connected with those brands and people recognize us with those brands. But I very proudly tell everyone that 70% of the volume that we handle is agri-produce, which has no branding. And we would continue to do that thing and focus more on the agri part of the industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anil. Maybe let's pass on now to Jaideep Singh from Rabobank.
Yeah, thanks, Sergio, and good afternoon, everybody. I think I noticed that I'm the only banker on the panel. I mean, of course, apart from IFC, and my friends and colleagues on the panel are, well, at least on Jain Irrigation, Anil is our client, but not Carrier or Snowman at the moment. But maybe I should say not yet.
Yes, not
rather.
yet, yeah.
I'm also indeed very pleased that we are in the smaller room. I think I find the larger rooms a bit intimidating, to be honest. Smaller is more cozy, more intimate, and hopefully more interactive. So please feel free to keep it that way, and I hope you can all hear me. A little bit about Rabobank. Firstly, we have a business in India as a commercial bank, but it's a relatively new business. We came to India in the late 1990s, firstly as a finance company, and then lately about 6 years ago as a bank, as a commercial bank. But of course, Rabobank globally, our origins are in the Netherlands, and perhaps not many people know this, but we have, our origins are in cooperative banking. We are not a listed company like several of our peer groups and commercial banks that we compete with. And in a way, this really helps us on our agenda to keep our business. We are not afraid to say no to business even though it is profitable if it doesn't fit in with the broader theme and agenda of the bank. About 120 years ago, there were several cooperatives. These were mainly Dutch small farming cooperatives that came together, basically poor farmers helping each other out who could not access formal banking channels to meet their financing needs. And over time, as that franchise grew, it expanded also into Europe. And today, of course, we are proud to say we are a multinational organization that is doing business in 40 countries globally. A few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, we, under an internal restructuring, we merged all these cooperatives. And today, we are basically one cooperative bank. And the formation of all these small cooperatives has changed into one larger organization. Our presence in 43 countries enables us to be close to both producers of food and agri, as well as consumers of food and agri. And we are also amongst the 25 safest banks in the world. The topic for the panel, which is about food waste and productivity, we see both these themes as key themes with our own sustainability agenda, which is very, very important in Rabo. I think Sergio started off by making comments about the way the world population is projected to grow and the demand for food that will increase. Whereas as a bank that is specializing in food and agri financing, this presents exciting opportunities for us on the one hand, but on the other hand, with climate change affecting farmers and farming communities and therefore food companies in such a significant way, we see ourselves as having a very strong vested interest for the furtherance of our own business to make sure that climate change is handled, as we heard earlier in discussions this morning, in a proper way in which the earth can cope and economies can progress and human beings can in future be happier about their planet. 3 years ago, we started a program called Banking for Food. And under Banking for Food, there is a big theme towards sustainable agriculture. One key thing that we are doing under Banking for Food is to assess the sustainability performance of our clients. And here we have focused mostly on clients who we have an exposure of 1 million euro and above. And what we've done is we have divided these clients into 4 different categories based on our internal criteria on their sustainability performances. So category A is the best clients and category D are the least good clients. For our best clients, we are trying to do more business with them. We are also trying to give them access to cheaper finance to promote their agenda for sustainability. And for the clients which are in the lower categories, say B and C, we are using our own knowledge and transference of best practices to get them up the curve to reach in the category A. And for those that are in category D and really have no sustainability agenda or sustainability goals and have not shown enough interest towards furthering those, we are in time trying to weed them out. So this is the contribution as a financier we are able to make towards meeting sustainability goals. Very recently, in fact just about a month ago, we have also made a major announcement where together with UN Environment, we have created a $1 billion US fund to finance sustainable agriculture. And this is going to be through a combination of both public and private funds. We are encouraging other multinational banks and global financial organizations to sign up as well. Because although from our side 1 billion is quite a large commitment, it is nowhere near what is really needed to promote this agenda. But the way we will use this facility will include providing grants, de-risking instruments, and credits to clients that are actively engaged in sustainable agriculture production. A very big theme currently for us, because this is a long duration project, but a very big theme currently is the protection of the earth. I mean, there are basically 4 themes under which we will categorize our contributions, which is earth, waste being very topical for our discussion today, stability and nutrition. The first focus is on earth, and under earth, the immediate projects that we have decided to cover includes preventing of deforestation and restoration of forest land. We have very interesting projects in Brazil and Indonesia and Southeast Asia generally, and also a very interesting one on water conservation, which I think Anil spoke about a little bit earlier, the importance of fresh water, which is in India, and I will share details about that when we get a chance to talk in the panel. Other than that, our contributions also come, we are very much a member of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. We have a seat there, and this is an organization where 200 very large influential companies globally, including several food and agri companies, are coming together to further the sustainability agenda. We are in fact chairing the financing group in this council, and we are actively working with the other companies in this council, which are food and agri companies, to meet their financing needs end to end, including financing their supply chains. I can also share with you that as influencers, so this is our non-financing responsibilities, we are part of several global roundtables on sensitive commodities. These are environmentally sensitive commodities like sugar, high consumer of water, cocoa, coffee, soybean, beef, and palm oil. I have some interesting information I can share with you on what we are doing in some of these areas when we get a chance to talk through the panel discussions.
Thank you very much, Adib. Let me maybe start a bit the discussion asking a couple of questions, but maybe Anil, if I can ask you, you mentioned earlier about the impact of technology, the utilization of technology, and having precision agriculture. What are the business models or the ideas that you think that could be quickly implemented and developed and scaled up?
I think in India recently, over last decade or so, a new concept of FPO is coming up. Farmer producer organizations, bringing together the farmers. Between 200 to 1,000 farmers getting together. so that they can buy their inputs in bulk, also sell their goods and have also an IT infrastructure to back that up. I believe if these groups can be rightly financed, adequate financing and timely finance, then there can be a significant change the way value addition takes place in agriculture, return to farmers can take place, and also you can implement right practices across the board, because in India farmers do remain small. The second part is that these farming group themselves can do primary processing. That's another way you can reduce the waste, and we are working with some farmer groups on that basis already now. Third, we are also seeing, as we talk about the climate change, and we recently did a project in Haryana where we are taking wastewater from 2 cities, treating it, and then giving that to agriculture. And energy we are using in this is all solar energy, to do the treatment, etc., etc. So that's another model which is coming up in India. There's a large amount of wastewater today. It is just being put into rivers and all of that. The fifth would be that most of the fertilizer being used in the country is broadcasted by hand. It's thrown on the field, and it does not need to go. It's a large amount of consumption is a waste. So instead, can we take fertilizer straight to the root zone? That's another way to significantly reduce the climate footprint, because in areas of Punjab, it's already causing cancers and things like that. So it's not just issue of agriculture, climate, it's also about health and nutrition at that point of time. Some of the other changes we have tried to do, and just to give you an example, something as simple as mango. Traditionally mangoes are planted 10 meter to 10 meter, so you have about hardly 50 trees in an acre. We have come up with a plan what we call ultra high density plantation, where you can put more than 500 trees of mangoes in the same acre. It gives farmer 4 times more output. You do the pruning, so you reduce the vegetation, so you have more of fruiting coming out, so you get 4 times more fruit than normal. So there are ways and ways you can continuously and consistently reduce all the inputs and increase the value. In India, for it to really succeed, I think some organization of farmers, these FPOs on one hand, right type of financing can really bring this large number of farmers who are still outside, I would say, value-added agriculture today, and they remain poor, and that's the whole loan waiver take place, all of that story which is taking place. And for that, also important thing is to bring water to these farmers. Now, half of the country, about 70 million hectares of farms, get water only from the one-time monsoon rain. We have 3 months, but they do not have access to water. So there, traditionally what government was doing was that we'll build a storage like a dam, and then have open canals to bring water to another area. Now that from the original 100 liters of water, actual water which goes to the crop in that system is hardly 32 liters. Rest is all wasted on the way or whatever. Now we have come up with new projects where you can do piped conveyance and then using drip and sprinkler, and that way you can use about 90% of water. So with the same amount of water, you can more than increase the area about 2.5 times. And that is the way, if the farmers can produce more using less water, I think that's the biggest immediate solution which can bring about almost about 200 to 300 million people from the poverty level to a higher level of, and while still saving the climate, improving productivity, and providing food and water security for the nation.
Thank you very much. And I think these are fascinating examples, and clearly of how you can do more with less, how we can develop and use technologies and simple business models to do that. So, Pankaj, if I may pass on to you now. You earlier gave us the very interesting example of how using cold chain infrastructure can really both improve the climate but also improve the financial sustainability for the farmers. What do you see as major obstacles for this type of examples to be replicated and be pushed forward?
I think as Anil rightly mentioned, we are recently seeing these FPOs coming together, because for a single individual farmer, it may be not be a viable solution for setting up the infrastructure for himself because of the seasonality, because of the limited period that a crop is harvested. But if you can get a cluster of people doing it, then the viability becomes much better. The awareness is one part, as I already mentioned, for people to be aware of the simplicity, the ease of using this equipment is one. The other thing I find is also that now you find the government focusing on farm gate infrastructure, which was not there earlier. For a crop to even enter the cold chain, it needs to be, it's like that golden hour. After harvesting, you need to quickly put it into a pre-cooling chamber or a chamber where, so that before it starts ripening, you are able to protect it. So I think these are some of the areas where the challenges are still there. We feel that if addressing these can really bring the fruit and vegetable wastage down significantly.
Thank you very much. Sunil, if I may turn to you now, you mentioned about all the impact that we can have through the logistic chains and so on. I mean, when we were discussing earlier, you also mentioning about what can be the role of the government, what can they do in order to help develop this type of sector?
Yeah. So as we all know, we keep reading that there is 35% of food which gets wasted in the country because of lack of cold chain. So the government has been taking many initiatives to facilitate creating infrastructure. And one of the major initiative that they have taken is subsidizing the capex for creating cold storages at places where it is required. And it has very successfully helped the country in creating capacity. But what we realize now is the capacity is created, but it is not utilized because there is subsidy in creating capacity, not in operating capacity. And the produce that we are moving through this whole distribution network of cold chain is something which is very low priced product and cannot sustain an end-to-end cold chain solution on it unless it is efficiently operated. The operating cost of a cold storage is almost 75% of the overall cost that you load onto the product. And hence only subsidizing the capex is not working out because it is built, operated for a year and then it is abandoned because there is no incentive to operate it. I think the government has to come up with a process or policy where they incentivize the operations and utilization of these capacities. One of the ways they can do it is they can subsidize power cost rather than subsidizing capex for these cold storages. I'll tell you, when we operate our cold storages, the power cost alone is 30% of the capex. We never went for a subsidy, but if there is some subsidy that can come in the power cost, the pricing can go down in terms of complete distribution network, and the low cost produce, the agriculture produce, can sustain those prices. So I think this is one of the things that government can think of changing. Another good initiative that government has come up with is implementing the whole new food laws in the country, FSSAI, which is redesigned and implemented in 2012. That has changed and standardized most of the processes of handling food in the country. So I think making it a little more stringent and putting up a monitoring system on the ground should help us more focus on quality as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sunil. Jaideep, you mentioned earlier about, I mean, Rabobank does a lot of innovation of very interesting models in other regions, in other countries. What are those that you think could be applicable to India, that you could give some of the examples of what has been done like in Latin America and other parts of the world?
Yeah, again, well, something which we have already done in India, and I can speak a little bit about that, is about groundwater and the consumption of water in the production of sugar. It's as we all know, I think sugar is a highly water consumptive product. And we have done a very interesting project for EID Parry, for which we partnered with WWF, as well as the World Business Council for Sustainable Development's India's chapter, where we have studied the groundwater in the area to determine how much of it is getting depleted and how seasonal it is. We have used that information to develop what we call a decision support tool, which EID PARI has been able to implement, both to make the groundwater more sustainable, but also to allow for the groundwater to be used 12 months. With the depletions, they were facing situations where they could not run the production of sugar, even though cane was available because of groundwater shortages. So that has helped them improve productivity as well as preserve groundwater reserves to a sustainable level. So that's one example. I can give another example of something which we have done in Brazil, and this is linked to our $1 billion fund which we have recently launched with UN Environment. This is on what we call ICLF, Integrated Crop, Livestock and Forest Management. Brazil, as you are aware, is a very large producer of food, the 4th largest producer of food in the world. But Brazil also has a lot of livestock and therefore a lot of grazing land. I think the total amount of grazing land in Brazil is about 170 million hectares. The assessments are that out of this 170, almost 50 is arable land, which can be transferred from grazing land to agricultural land. Currently, agricultural land in Brazil is being made available through deforestation, which we are trying to prevent. So our project over there is more about how to make this 50 million odd hectare of land more accessible for agriculture, and then the remaining 120, how to increase the productivity of that to still feed livestock to a level which is sustainable and growing. So through this integrated approach, we find solutions are coming out, both by making land which was previously considered uncultivable to make it cultivable, and also land which is in remote areas where cultivation has not been currently conceived. We are working with government and other organizations to make that viable through public-private funding partnerships. So these are 2 examples. There are other examples also in Southeast Asia on rice. I think Anil mentioned about how drip irrigation is helping to cut down the amount of water that is used for rice production. That is another project we are supporting in Indonesia. And with palm oil in Indonesia, also with a product, a commodity which has historically resulted in a lot of cutting of trees and forests. We are working very actively with partners there, the government as well as large palm oil buyers, to try and rehabilitate some of the land which has gone waste. And this is through financial and non-financial means. Financial through providing guarantees and support for farmers to rehabilitate the land, and non-financial by way of sharing best practices which we learn from our exposure in other markets as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jaideep. I'd like to ask the panel members a more random question. Some of you have worked with IFC, and as you know, we are very keen on doing more on the climate smart agriculture front. I mean, we're very proud that last fiscal year we've committed above $1 billion in climate smart agriculture, which was a very record high for us. But I'm sure there's more and different things that we could do. So any ideas how an institution like IFC or the World Bank in general, World Bank Group, can support more this sector? Anil?
Cheaper financing.
Cheaper financing. I think the mic is not working.
I believe, it's very important that if IFC, World Bank as a group can come in and provide support to strengthen these FPO level organizations by giving them knowledge about how to manage their finances or whatever, because that's lacking today. When these people come together, they're unable to administer themselves or take this further. Because there, I think once it is done properly and that knowledge transfer, if you do, I think that's going to play an important role. Another thing, I mean, for example, now we have established a non-banking finance company to give loan to the farmers who want to buy, agriculture technology related equipment, etc. There, IFC is already a shareholder. But in terms of when we are now trying to finance the farmer, We are, as NBFC in India, we are not allowed to have access to deposits, so we don't have low cost finance. Third, I'll give you an example of a project in Maharashtra where we have convinced the government that in sugarcane, in Maharashtra state, sugarcane occupies only 3% of approximately land area under cultivation, but it uses somewhere between 40 to 50% of water as one crop. Now the government has taken a decision that they would like to ensure that these farmers must do drip irrigated sugarcane, and the sugar mills must buy drip irrigated sugarcane. But then they're trying to get the financing from the NABARD and whatever, the scheme is still not moving on. So some kind of innovative financing on a long-term basis, I think is required. You don't need subsidies, but right type of finance would play an important role, vis-a-vis what I have seen World Bank can do.
Thank you very much. I think these are very good directions. I mean, we are, IFC does work with like cooperatives and helps finance some of those in other regions. This is something that we could look at how we could do this also in India, and then we have our advisory services that helps this type of groups like get together, set together the way they're working. So this is a very good direction. The second point you were mentioning around agri-finance is also an area that we're looking into scaling up. We have, I agree that is one of the areas where we can reach the biggest number of farmers and can have a big impact in terms of climate smart agriculture, since we know that a lot of the impact is at the farmer level. And then pushing for this innovative sort of schemes and innovative ideas. It's something that we also should be looking more into. We are working closer with our friends and colleagues from the World Bank in order to do more of public-private partnerships and this notion of IFC creating markets, of saying going into spaces where by bringing together private and public sector, you can then deliver more impact on the ground. So this is something we're trying to do. But I don't know if other panel members want to also give IFC some suggestions or ideas. Please.
Go ahead, sorry.
Okay, so I think today we just recently had the World Food India mega summit here in Delhi itself, and we saw the opportunities in food, food processing, food, reducing food wastage. We saw a lot of global companies coming into India. We saw a lot of Indian companies, a lot of entrepreneurs who want to enter the food sector. I know personally of people quitting high-paying jobs and getting into food, whether it is food processing, food cultivation. I know people doing mushroom exports from India and stuff like that. So I think financing options for food industry definitely are an opportunity. A lot of opportunities there for.
Thank you very much, Pankaj. I think it's a sector that we are very keen on supporting. And I didn't mention, I think this at the beginning, but when we're looking at the specificities of the food sector in India, a lot of the food is actually sold without being processed locally, and so increasing the part of transformation of food locally would have a significant impact. So I don't know.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, if you look at the two largest contributors to greenhouse gases, it's fossil fuel and then it's agriculture. And whereas the fossil fuel greenhouse gases is being tackled fairly well now by clean energy. Clean energy today, if you look at the industry, has access to the best technology, as well as has of late access to finance as well. That is not the same in agriculture. And in agriculture, perhaps in developed economies where farm sizes are large and farmers themselves are large businessmen, they do have access to finance and therefore also to technologies to make their produce more sustainable. But a lot of the food is actually grown in emerging markets where this type of technology and financing options are not really available. And although I'm aware that IFC has a strong focus on emerging markets, but I still feel the ability of IFC to promote companies that can bring technology into emerging markets to make agriculture more sustainable would be one idea.
Thank you very much, Jaideep. I think that's a very good direction also that we can focus on.
One more thing.
Go ahead and please.
One more thing. You know, in India, I talked about irrigation and bringing water up to the farm, and then farmers will grow more value-added crop, right? And reduce wastage, productivity gain. Those have been done by the government departments. For the first time, government was thinking of bringing PPP in the irrigation and agriculture sector. The policy is being formulated now. So the framework is that you know, the person who will do the PPP along with the government can get part of the funding now, and the remainder over next 15 years through you know, sale of water to Water Users Association, and recover over a longer period of time, ensuring that farmers get the knowledge, they produce more, all of that. So whether IFC World Bank Group can come up with a product, financial product, which can help the people who will get into this PPP with the government, whether, you know, 15-year long repayments, cash flows can be considered.
Look, I mean, we have actually been, as you probably know, very active on PPPs, and we've shifted a lot the focus. I mean, expanded the focus beyond just infrastructure, which was sort of the first wave of PPPs that IFC got involved in, and we've been doing PPPs in agriculture, including, like, for instance, silos and this type of infrastructure that is needed. But we're very much open to looking into that type of scheme. So thank you very much for all these ideas. I wanted to give an opportunity to the audience to ask questions to our panel members or make comments. So I think there's a microphone. Gentleman in the front. The microphone is coming.
More comments than questions. It's delightful to see industry being hemmed together on both sides, flanked by money. A few comments. My name is Rohtash Mal. I run a company in the farming as a service business. We provide mechanized services to farmers all across the value chain on a pay-for-use basis. We charge per acre. We're operating in Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan. A few comments to your comments. One on perishability. I believe that the thermal vector, i.e. the cold vector to perishability, is under threat. We are now going to be looking at ultraviolets to be able to even pasteurize milk, as indeed using ethylene to look at vegetables going long distances. And a lot of experiments and proofs of concept around the world are coming to commercial these things. And I think apart from refrigeration will never go away, but apart from refrigeration, this is a great vector to be looking at. Second, in India, particularly in North India, we are seeing a huge amount of residue management problems, particularly the environment getting impacted by burning of stubble. And an opportunity to cut, rake, bale, and deliver this as a fuel to power plants is actually waiting to happen. And some experiments and some proofs of concept have already happened. And I think this sector is ready to kind of be supported very strongly, commercially speaking. A comment on on-ground food processing. Primary processing. I think the answer, and a lot of primary processing has also failed because primary processing facilities have been nailed to the ground. It's time for thinking about primary processing on wheels, so to speak, because once a certain area has been cleaned up, and we do know harvesting moves with the sun, we need to get these on wheels. So that's the third one. On water conservation, particularly to Anil's area, and Anil's done a lot of pioneering work here, their company. This is about horticulture, or sugarcane will do, and so on. I think the huge area is where flood irrigation is done for a variety of crops, whether it's wheat, rice, etc., etc. And the dosing, fertilizer dosing for that flood irrigation. Solutions are required to, so to speak, get a measure of what's under the soil in terms of chemistry, and then using dosing, so to speak, in flood irrigation to be able to do that. It will result in averages, but nevertheless a situation far better from where it is. The ultimate problem that, that I'm looking at with my experience from the ground is water is unpriced in India. So this appeal particularly that says save water is an emotional appeal. It goes a distance. Farmers, particularly in water stressed areas, do listen to that. But since it's unpriced, I think the platform to sell it on, so to speak, the appeal, is productivity. So if you stress water availability to the root system, you get higher productivity. That vector has not so far, apart from Jain irrigation, has not been widely used. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mal. I think interesting comments, and I think you're highlighting that in order to address the issues about climate in the agricultural space, there's all kinds of solutions that need to be brought together, and I think looking at it through different angles and bringing different components will help. But gentlemen,
I'm Vijay here from Sadhguru. We are an innovation downstreaming investment body. And a couple of things that I profusely appreciate elements that have been brought out for climate adaptation as well as mitigation on the post-harvest end of it, other than of course irrigation on the input side. I think the key thing is that we are now looking at crops being more resilient to the climate change, inevitable elements there, being more stress tolerant, more drought tolerant, more salt tolerant, more heat tolerant. So that's a huge investment that's moving in for making crops more resilient, and that's why the genetics and seed industry kind of constrained that there's nobody here, talking about the huge investment needed in that area to bring it to tropics here. We do it all the way from bioinformatics solutions to look at huge gene pool that's available today in the nature to get this plant more resilient through traditional breeding processes. But we do see going forward a very rapid process of genetics coming in with a substantial investment that's required to move it to faster adaptation of the small farmer level. The second thing on the post-harvest end is that we have very huge diversity or heterogeneity in horticulture crops in the country as well as grains. We just have 4 varieties of apple in the United States, and we process 60% of those 4 varieties. We have 300 varieties of citrus in this country, right? I love the example of quinoa. That's why now we see the quinoa is being processed, santras being processed, musambi is being processed. But there are, elements of such high diversity. So the strategy to mitigate waste is get those local processors, do it in small scale, rather than aggregating 2 of those quinoa varieties across the country, and then making mega processing there. And that would mean that a lot of good processing technologies come in for small ventures to sustain themselves, applying high pressure processing, any other technologies that are low emission intensive. So those are, I think, a couple of thoughts that I want to leave it with you. That huge investment needed, of course, in the crop genetics part of it. Second, of course, in regional processing of these crops that are hugely diverse. We're not going to destroy diversity. We're going to retain it, but have local processing of those. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vijay. Very, very interesting comments. So I think we have, please, one more comment, questions.
Short question for Mr. Jain. Micro irrigation is clearly one of the smartest things to do in agriculture. Yet over 30 years, our penetration is less than 10% or around 10%. Why and what can make it change? Without that, we don't solve the water problem, right?
Sure. So, in fact, while in percentage, in India, whenever you talk of statistics, it's very different on a global scale. India is today at a micro irrigation level, on a drip irrigation, is already largest market in the world. Even in US, the area actually under drip and sprinkler is much less, except those center pivot sprinklers. The challenge is that, the earlier speaker also referred, no value for water. So you are selling something to farmer, asking him to invest up to about 1 lakh rupee per hectare or $1,500 per hectare. While today, he has to just invest into a small pump, he gets almost free water and free electricity. So we have to go through a very difficult road to convince him that this investment is going to result into higher level of productivity, you're going to make more money, therefore you should invest. He doesn't have money, so he should take a loan. And to take a loan, then he needs to give mortgage and security, and farmers have already mortgaged their land, let's say for the crop loans they take. So that's a kind of a complex scenario. But at least what we have seen, that wherever we have been able to show to the farmer, in a group of farmer, that this has resulted into higher level of productivity, none of those farmers are going back to traditional agriculture. Once they get hooked on to drip, they will never go back to flood, because they see all the benefit and they see that's the only way agriculture can be done. The government came up with this whole subsidy support to the farmers to buy. At the state level, over a period of time, the whole program became inefficient. But now government through Aadhaar is going to give direct credit to the farmer's bank account. If that can be done in a more efficient way, I think that will happen, because unless we bring at least 40-50 million hectares under this, our water issue is not going to be solved. I mean, our states are already fighting. In India, there is such a big fight for water across the states.
Thank you. I think there was a lady in the back who wants to ask a question, please.
Yeah, I just want to bring the attention back to the climate aspect of the agricultural process. And we've heard about financing, value chain financing, and which is much more going into the direction what is already happening in terms of fertilizer-led, pesticide-heavy farming. But there are also initiatives which are happening in India, which are moving away from fertilizers and pesticides and are able to demonstrate a huge amount of climate resilience, sturdiness in the face of weather fluctuations, rainfall, flood, heat, temperatures, and everything. But what they actually, again, need is there's the question of scale, because these are the farm holdings are small. Some of this, of course, the role played by the government will be critical in order to scale up. But I just wanted to understand from the point of view of IFC that if there are any examples where you have come in as an investor, and if there are some partial credit enhancement schemes that you have initiated, which are looking at different ways of farming itself, which transforms the agricultural practices by themselves. I mean, of course, there's a whole new kind of value chain that can be created over there, which goes in parallel with the traditional fertilizer-led farming practices. Just wanted to understand that.
Thank you. I think it's a good question. Look, we have done, we've done quite a lot of efforts to reach out to different types of innovation when it comes to agriculture. And whether it's precision farming, whether it's different uses of fertilizer, and making, again, with the idea of saying, how can we do more with less, and how can we be more effective? So we have a certain number of examples. I mean, be happy to put some of my colleagues in touch with you, and we can give you some of those later then. Okay. I think one more question. I know we are getting a bit over time, so lady.
I was just reading the title.
There's a mic just behind us.
Agriculture, building competitive and resilient food supply chains. I was just wondering, I mean, this question came to my mind when Jaideep was talking about 3% of the land actually consuming 40 to 50% of the water in Maharashtra, the sugarcane crop. Can something not be done to switch the crop? I mean, like, say, for example, rice. Rice is a water guzzling crop. If we don't have water in that region, instead of building irrigation systems like canals, can we not actually switch to millets? Would that not impact climate in a positive way while keeping the food supply secure?
So I don't know if someone wants to take the question.
Yeah, I don't know actually who this question is to, because there's no agricultural research person on the panel.
So we had one more chair. Maybe that's what we should have had with us. But I think, I mean,
I can very generically say that it has happened, but the fact that the sugar needs to be produced to meet current and anticipated demand is a fact of life. So to have a more sustainable way to produce that sugar is still required. There is crop alternative taking place. That is also part of the advisory that farmers are receiving from experts, how in fact to keep the land more arable as well. And crop rotation and what you suggest to move to alternate crops is happening. But my comment was more about wherever sugar has to be produced, the groundwater has to be preserved. Yeah.
No, I think she's raised a very, if I may.
Yes.
I think she's raised a very, very important point, and I think it's very critical, and I think it was answered also. In India, we are not pricing water and power in agriculture. And as long as we don't do that, we are actually having a destructive towards the climate smart. We're actually creating problems, not helping it. And as far as Maharashtra is concerned, I come from Kolhapur, the heart belt of sugarcane. It's just the most easy crop to grow. Everything is tied up from the beginning till the end. And you get your credit, you get your financing, you get your marketing, it's what we call lazy farming. But there are no disincentives. And water pricing and power pricing can be disincentives, those don't exist. But I think there is a consciousness now, I think, with this government that they would want to change the cropping pattern because it's really guzzles water. And I wouldn't agree with you when you say sugar requirements. I'm sure people can eat less sugar and be healthier.
Look, I know we need to wrap up, but I just want to make one comment. As we know, agriculture is one of the sectors in the global economy that has the highest number of subsidies and the highest numbers of public intervention. When in reality, farming is actually a very private sector business. It's a farmer company that is actually doing what he or she should be doing in terms of growing the foods and the crops. A lot of these public interventions do create some incentives on the one hand which are positive, but also some distortions that are not positive. And I think some of the examples that you can say where we could have a joint approach both with private and public of reconsidering some of the interventions in some sectors and say, look, the farmers are not going to switch from sugar to another crop just by themselves because they wake up one morning and say, hey, I'm going to do things differently. There need to be some kind of a framework that will then encourage them to do it. And I think you asking the very good questions. I think that the panel today was trying to focus more on some some parts of the agenda of climate smart agriculture. As you can see, it's a very interesting topic that generates a lot of questions. So I'm very grateful for all your comments and questions. I do need to wrap up. I see there's more hands, but I do need to wrap up, and there's two things I need to do before wrapping up. One, I just wanted to mention a compendium that we are launching today. We're taking advantage of this conference to launch the Making Agriculture Climate Smart compendium. It's a business perspective from South Asia. So it gives 9 examples of concrete examples of IFC clients and partners of what they're doing. Most of the examples are in India, some are in the region, and some are in the panel or in the previous panel that this morning. The document is distributed outside, so please feel free to grab a copy on your way out. But it's something that I just wanted to mention. I think it's a very illustrative cases of very concrete examples of what can be done by the private sector in order to promote climate smart agriculture. And this was done with the support of some donors. So I'd like to thank the governments of Australia, Canada, Denmark, Hungary, Japan, Netherlands, and the Republic of Korea. I'm going as fast as I can. Thank you so much, all the donors, for helping us issue this very interesting compendium. And before we close and we thank the panelists, I would like to give the opportunity to each of them to give us one message before we go. So maybe we'll start this time from the other side. So Jaideep, if you want to start one message to the audience before leaving on the discussion today to take back home.
I'll just go back to the comments that were made in the morning session, which is that conferences are held and agreements are made, and then there is always a problem with the carry through, and people say one thing at conferences and probably don't act on that sufficiently. So I think that is really something where, as the situation on climate gets more, I am using the word responsibly, desperate, I think getting action embedded in the way in which conferences are held and followed through is very important here on.
Sunil?
Yeah, I would like to add to the same thing that So I would like to add to the same thing that the implementation is more important. There are so many policies in the country, so much of knowledge in the country, and getting or importing knowledge from any parts of the world is quite easy today. But having that implemented on the ground is more important, and we are only responsible for it. So we should focus more on implementation now. We always wait for the best solution, thinking that let's wait for the better one. It is more important that whatever we know, let us go and implement it. Thank you.
Thank you. Akash?
Yeah, I think there's a huge, the farmer out there is waiting for a lot of this good ideas to come to him and for him to see the benefits. I totally agree that on one side we have huge production, but we still have farmer suicide. So I think it's a question of taking it to the farm gate and making sure his life gets better.
Thank you. Anil?
I would say let's leave this world better than we found it. It's possible with the help of technology, knowledge transfer, and right type of finance.
Great. Thank you very much. With these inspiring words, please join me in thanking all the panelists, and thank you very much for joining.